Welcome to 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. Empowering women like you to amplify your voice, your message, your movement. We believe that if 10,000 new women stepped into high-level leadership platforms, we can transform the industries across the planet. 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. And now your host, Narissa Street.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages, where we are helping you understand what you need to do in order to amplify your voice so that you can use your message, your mission, and your movement to change the world. We are so excited to have with us today Colleen Rosenblum. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
Yay. Well, we're excited to have you. So it's for the audience who will be listening. So there's ways that they can connect with you, and they'll find out a little bit more about you when they do their clicking and all that kind of stuff afterwards. But we don't want them to leave this interview right now. We want them to hear specifically from you who you are. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Colleen, and I am a mom to two amazing daughters.
Yay!
Yay! They're now 24 and 22, and I actually, one got engaged, so I will be planning a wedding. I know. Could you stand it? She was, Father of the Bride movie keeps coming back to me. And I have been married to my high school sweetheart for 28 years. And I have had several careers in my lifetime. I started out as an attorney.
What kind of attorney?
I actually did eminent domain, which is a not very attractive, area of the law, but it paid the bills. Right. And my husband and I both went to law school because we went through high school and college and law school together. And I think I knew in law school that I was not meant to be a lawyer. It's just not something that I have a passion for. But once you're in it, I finish what I start. So I finished and I practiced law for, quite a number of years. And then I had my kids and stayed home. But when it was time to go back, I didn't really want to practice law anymore. So I pivoted a 180 and became a Pilates instructor.
Wow. Why Pilates?
Exactly. I get that a lot. Because, I wanted to find something I was passionate about. I didn't have a passion for the law, at least not the areas I was practicing. I had wanted to do children's rights and I worked at the Guardian Ad Litem program for quite some, for the last year of my law school. But you couldn't survive. You couldn't pay your bills and do that, unfortunately. So I had to kind of sell out to a big law firm and do that for a while, but I never had a passion for it. And when I started taking Pilates classes, I really developed a passion for what I was doing. I understood it. I got why it was so helpful for your body. So I went to school for it and taught for about 14 or 15 years.
Right.
And then once I became an empty nester, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, and I decided to become a podcaster. What? Right? 52? Why would you do that?
Why not?
Well, exactly. And that was my answer. Why wouldn't I do? I had time now to kind of put myself first, which was something I was not used to doing. And I really feel like there's this demographic of women from about 45 to 70 that media and society for a large portion of the world don't really pay attention to us. We're not considered in the conversation a lot of times. So we decided to make a podcast so that people would start getting voices together and hear us. And it's been great.
That's fantastic. And I will tell you from sitting in, rooms where those decisions are made, it has been that way for a while. And the people who start changing those minds are the people who actually do start creating their own content and do start deciding that the story that they're telling is valid enough to produce it on their own. And so then, the game changers are always the ones who started with themselves. So really interesting that the pursuit of your passion just continued to push you in this amazing direction. And so I think I want to talk a little bit about what you're saying there as far as putting yourself first. So the putting yourself first is what got you to Pilates, right?
For the first small step, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was a very uncomfortable feeling, honestly, because we are often taught as young women, okay, you're going to have a family and you're going to put everybody first, or you're going to have a career and you're going to put that first. And something else is always first. But as we get older, it's kind of like we have this moment where we say, well, why can't I put myself first?
Right.
Even if it's just a small thing, like take a dance class or, read a book or decide you can say no without having to have a reason. Like, no, but I can't do this because.
Yeah. No is a complete sentence, right?
Exactly. But for some reason, we don't believe that until we get a little bit older and a little more self-confident in what our needs are.
I think I think that you're onto something as far as the development. I think in the world of acknowledging when your needs are met, then other people's needs will be met too. I think it's interesting that we have to get to a certain age before that happens. But I think more and more people are acknowledging that as long as you're a good person, this is something that I tell a lot of people in my workshops. If you're a good person, then being selfish is good, right? So the putting yourself first, then of course nourishes your two daughters, and of course nourishes your husband, and of course nourishes the people around you. And so I cannot imagine you're not an awesome Pilates instructor. Now, do you still do Pilates, or is it the podcasting full time now?
I do Pilates for myself now. I created a studio in my house years ago, and I still do it for me because I still have a passion for it, but I just felt this need out there to get to talk about midlife and just this cultural lag in the world that for some reason, when you hit menopause or you hit midlife, you're old. Like it's as if you don't have another 30 or 40 years of living left to do, and it's taboo. People don't want to talk about it. And I just think it needs to come up with the times. Yeah. Women in midlife, it is middle. It is not the end.
Right.
Middle.
Right.
And so I kind of try to follow the voice. When I say voices in my head, that probably doesn't sound very good, but
that's fine. That's fine. It's called intuition.
Exactly. Yeah. It's never a word for it. But I kind of follow something that I just feel like is taking me in one direction or another. And it's always led me in pretty good paths. I think I didn't hear it very well in my 20s because there was a lot of other noise.
Right.
But as you get older, I think you're clear in your intent and what you want. And that gives you the freedom. I talk a lot about freedom in our 50s that is earned. And if you change your perspective and you look at things as freedoms, for example, the invisible woman syndrome. A lot of women talk about as they get older, they're not the first person seen in a room. They're not heard by the corporate world anymore. And you can look at that as a tragedy or kind of as a superpower because you can do anything you want and you don't have to worry about not that you worry about consequences, but you don't care what people think anymore. It's a freedom. You reach an age where you're simply going to do something because you find it interesting, you want to do it. And if someone else doesn't like it, that's really their journey. It's not yours.
Right. So the other thing that you talked about, because I love the exploration that you get to in the middle life when you have, finally decided to clear, as you're saying, clear the noise of other people and other things. So I think part of that then makes you clear also about the things that you love, right? So I'd like to go back and talk about, because I think a lot of people struggle with this. There is that decision that you made when you said, I pursued law, and that's a great pursuit, and it's a pursuit where it's you could do good for people, right? So I pursued law, and I got the law degree, and I started the practice, and then I had my children, and then something else came up. So there is the decision you have to make to not go back. Can you discuss, what was going on for you in that decision? Because people sometimes think, I made the decision, and so now I'm not going
Yes, it was that simple.
It was that simple. It's not. Please talk about that.
I think for me, it carried a lot of guilt because I put 3 years of my life into law school, and lawyers make good living and all those things. But when I looked at my daughters and I knew that they are watching me because they see everything, they absorb everything. And I didn't want them to see me being unhappy every day having to go into work. I didn't want them to see me settling for something, because I took what I learned as a lawyer and I brought it to the next thing that I did. It's not like you have to cut off one thing and start something else. You can take your experiences and your knowledge. I think one of the reasons why I enjoy podcasting so much and I enjoy interviewing people is because I've had that background in research. And I can, kind of have a clear intent on what I want to get out of a particular interview, as opposed to just like having no idea or being intimidated by, oh, am I going to talk to this person or am I going to talk to that person? I find it a challenge. And I think that's from my lawyer years. I'm not as overwhelmed by it. Is the way to put that. But my kids were watching and I didn't want them to see me unhappy. I wanted them to follow their own passions in life. And that was not going to happen if I was practicing law every day. And it's funny because they would say to their friends when they were younger, my mom's a Pilates instructor, as if that was like the coolest thing in the world. And so it's all perspective. It's, and I would get the people going, well, why would you do that? Well, you're not living my life, and my choices are my choices. And my husband, I think you really need a partnership and a supportive spouse.
Right. I'm glad you went there. I'm glad you went.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. If my husband had given me like guilt, no, he is 100% supportive. And the same goes for me and everything he does. But you have to have that support system, because there would have been enough guilt just from me saying, should I do this? But if he was like, how could you think of doing this? That would have been much more challenging. So no, I have a very supportive husband. And I think if you're willing to put in the hard work at whatever you choose to do, you can do it. It's just you can't expect it all to come to your door. You have to go out and work for it.
Hey, this is a great episode, right? Want to carry the insight from our show wherever you go? Visit myjoyisvaluable.com for the best resources that we've gathered that are inspired by expert guests. Find support for your business, tools to organize your life, and more. That's myjoyisvaluable.com.
Well, it's great that you talked about, the fact that there was some guilt involved, because I think particularly people who are used to doing good things, when you start to make the transition to being good to yourself first, there is that guilt. And then love that your daughters were definitely part of the inspiration. And, also that we have to have the right support behind us. And so I think, for the listeners, if you're in the watchers, if you can't be your supportive family, then, look for a tribe, find some people online who think the same way that you do, and connect with them. Use the resources that are available to us now. Definitely, with the internet being everywhere, there's people who are connected to you who can support that. So let's get into the podcast, right? So tell us a little bit about this absolutely amazing podcast that is serving the needs of people whose needs are not being met by the media so far.
Well, thank you. The podcast is called Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. And we named it that for a very specific reason. I wanted to track the demographic, obviously, and the age range, hit you with the hot topics, or hot flashes. The cool topics, I know, I can't remember. Brain fog, it's real. And then cool topics. Cool topics, because we wanted to cover everything. Women are not one-dimensional, and we wanted to show that we could talk about death one week and we could talk about makeup the next, and we could talk about the Supreme Court one week, and we could talk about a grandmother who's starting a new journey writing. It's whatever you want your midlife to be. So our intent is to really change the narrative in midlife. And for women, we want them to be a part of it. So we're always asking our listeners, please email us with topics. If we don't know the answer to it, we will find it. But it has been amazing. We started end of last September, having no clue what we were doing. We were not tech savvy.
Beautiful.
So we're like, okay, anyone can do something if they take the time to learn to do it, going to work. And we did. I learned how to do social media. Well, my kids just laugh at me now about it, but I learned how to tape and edit and all those things. But
Right.
it was starting to resonate. We were starting to get listeners, and we were starting to get people really saying, thank you. You are the voice of what I've been trying to say, and people aren't listening. Or we would get, you know what, I feel a little less alone.
Right.
Like
Right.
and that was huge for me,
Right.
because I think a lot of women in midlife, they just feel like their kids have left. Maybe their husband's still there. Maybe he's not, but you're
Right.
not making friends as easily. So we will talk about topics like how to make friends over 45 or 50,
Nice.
or, how to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And we get emails all the time about women feeling less alone. And I love that. That just gets me right, where it's important, because if we can be the voice for other women who don't feel like they have one, that's a real gift. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's amazing, because, and I think also the fact that you're creating a tribe of women by engaging them and saying, hey, call in. Well, maybe not call in, but email it. This is the radio station person. It's like a call in.
Call in and
Email. So
Right.
that engagement and that discussion with your audience, I want my audience to hear that your voice and your amplification of your voice also means that you're engaging in a dialogue. So I think that that's definitely what's keeping you relevant, making sure that the audience knows that you hear them, especially because your audience doesn't feel heard.
Right.
Having that as something that you provide is absolutely amazing. So with my audience, we want to get into a couple of things that will help the audience get to some of the places that you've been able to get to. And so talk to me about, because there's a podcast episode that you just recently got, which I know you're really excited about. Talk to me about how you got that interview and what you feel is next for your podcast.
Well, I think you're talking about the Tammy Boyd Franklin and Kim Franklin
Yeah.
podcast, which we are very proud of. Tammy Boyd Franklin and Kim Franklin are a couple from Kentucky who fought all the way to the Supreme Court and won the right for marriage equality. I mean, come on, like, it doesn't get any cooler than getting to talk to people like that.
Right.
And the amazing, first off, we happened to get them because my co-host knows Tammy.
Wow.
But the funny part was that, because I had no idea, she goes, I think I have a friend of mine, because we were talking about LGBTQ month, and I was saying that I wanted to get some representatives in the midlife area to talk. And she goes, I think my friend Tammy went up to the Supreme Court. I'm like, what?
Right.
Stop her. I'm sorry. Did you just casually mention that she went to the Supreme Court? I was like, she goes, yeah, I think about marriage equality. I was like,
what?
You just don't know where you're going to meet people. So she had gone to school with her, like elementary school, high school, and they had lost touch. And I was like, oh, we're getting back in touch real quick. And they were amazing. They're very down to earth. And what I loved about what they said was that they just were like, right is right and wrong is wrong.
Right.
And I knew what I was doing was right. And they had such a passion for it. They talked about how, once a lot of other lawyers got involved, that it was who's going to the Supreme Court, who's going to argue, who's going to get all the notoriety. But for them, they just wanted their marriage recognized.
Right.
They wanted their, insurance to be benefited. They wanted very simple things that every person has a right to. And Kim had said, your morality does not overrule my legality. And that was kind of the key phrase that I loved. And I kind of promoted the podcast with that.
Wow.
We knew going into this that you're going to get people who agree or disagree. But again, it's my voice. I get to use my podcast to stand for my voice. And I was just so proud of it. Both of us were. They're a lovely couple. They're living their best life. They have grandkids now. And they did this for the legacy of the next generation. Because they're going to be the ones who get to take for granted that they got married and that it's legal in the state. So it was a really interesting conversation. They talked about what the Supreme Court was like, the big chairs that everybody sits in, how somebody came in screaming that they were all going to hell, and the Supreme Court justices were removed from the room and then brought back in. So little things like that you would never know about, that the spouses of the Supreme Court justices were there, and you could kind of tell from their faces more how the judges were leaning than the actual judges.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, some little cool things like that we explored, and it was really great. They didn't get too much negative. The interesting is they didn't get much publicity, period, in Kentucky. Their local newspaper only ran one article. I mean, you would think that they would be front page news everywhere in Kentucky.
Yeah. I mean, that there's a few reasons that could be.
Right, exactly.
Do we want everybody running to get married now? Maybe.
Yeah, and they don't. Right. They just, kept doing it with a very clear focus that this is what we feel is the right thing. And she kept saying, Tammy, I wanted to be selfish. Getting back to being selfish. I wanted to be selfish and be married to my wife and have it recognized in this country. So, sometimes being selfish gets such a bad rap, and it can be a bad thing in the wrong context. But for the right reasons, selfish can propel things forward.
Yep.
So it's sometimes okay to be selfish.
Yep. And for me, I think I love selfish can propel things forward. I think for a lot of people, when they put themselves, as you're talking about the context, when they put themselves into the context of a good person, and I think that is the good people who are afraid to be selfish. That is always those are always the ones that you're like, no, please be more selfish. You're selfish. Look how many people benefit. So, having that discussion, selfish is what got you to this podcast. Selfish is what, is allowing you to have a voice, and selfish is what is helping you inspire your two daughters.
Yes.
So
like you said, when it's done for the right reasons and it's done for a positive purpose, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. So what's also, I think, is cool, and I want my listeners to make sure that they're hearing, is that you have some transferable skills from being a lawyer. I mean, definitely, having the research that has brought you to being able to be a good interviewer. And then, of course, I'm sure it was good to hear all the information, the interesting things about the Supreme Court, having the lawyer background.
Oh, to be a fly on that wall, I said I would have loved to have been there. But, I think as you get to midlife, you take a little bit from every life experience. And even with Pilates, because so much of it was psychology, so much of it was, because if I was teaching a private or a duet, people wanted to talk. They wanted to talk through the hour. And so I was as much a psychologist in that, and that's my background in college, as I was a Pilates instructor. So I take that aspect of kind of, listening and understanding and focusing, getting people to focus, which is not always an easy thing to do.
Right.
I think if you can take a little bit from everything you experience in life and put it in, it builds. And that's why I think it's such a shame that in the corporate world, until we get more women CEOs that are midlife, women who are our age are not going to be represented and appreciated in the corporate world. With all the life experience they bring to the table, it's still not being paid attention to. So that's something that we want to delve into as well.
Yeah, and I echo you in that, which is why I'm excited to have you on my podcast. So to help those women who are still figuring themselves out, you've been authentic, I think, in the development of your work. So do you feel like that's affected your bottom line? Because that's their concern.
Yes, I think, I did an episode with my daughter, my oldest daughter, Jordan, who had a very severe eating disorder when she was a teenager. And we really never talked about it too much. I want to say publicly, obviously, it's just, because it was her journey to tell.
Right.
She said she thought that the platform that I had might help other people. And so we taped it, and it took me about 2 to 3 months to feel comfortable in posting it, because I made myself so vulnerable. And it was so real and raw that I had to be prepared for that. And I told my Facebook group, listen, guys, this episode's going up, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm really vulnerable here. And I'm nervous. Like, I'm nervous. And I got such a great response that helped me. So it's a give and take from both sides. But I think as we get older, be authentic. That's all you can be. Like, you are who you are. And I think people appreciate that. I think people want to see the real you. They don't want to see the, hey there, how you doing?
Right.
You know, and we're not really big on, here's, you know, the diet plan for a 50-year-old woman, and here's this. Like, it's not us. It's just, we are trying to share life experiences and bonding and community. That's really what it's about. So I think being vulnerable is more like being real, and people, that resonates with people. Because everyone comes to the table with something.
So what do you think people misunderstand about you? Then let's.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I've pretty much talked so much about stuff. Misunderstand, I guess, maybe the reasons why I did leave the law, or why we moved from South Florida to Tennessee. And I think some people were like, what are you doing? And just the fact that I can listen to the voice and say, okay, this is what I think we need to do. I think people misunderstand that because it's affecting them.
Right.
And they think it's somehow trying to be a negative to them, when it's really, I'm just trying to be real for myself and for my kids and for my husband, because ultimately they are the priority in everything that I do. So I don't know. I guess, you know, it's hard because someone doesn't walk up to you and go, I misunderstood what you were saying. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really say, at least I haven't experienced that too much. But I'll get the, why are you doing that? Well, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And then I'll understand, you didn't understand what my intention. I'm really big on intention. What is my intention? Because when I do that, I think I'm clear in the stance that I take in the podcast we make.
Yeah, and I asked that question because I know some of the concern that a lot of women have in stepping out is that they will be misunderstood.
Oh, I see.
And so knowing that the misunderstanding may never be communicated to you, as you said, or that, you know, you can't
make everybody.
You can't make everybody happy, you know. So I want people to get that it's something that may happen, and even with, as you say, the best intentions, people are always going to have their own filter.
And it's amazing too, because sometimes you will do something with the best intentions, and because they saw it through their eyes, it looks totally different.
Absolutely.
And I've learned as we get older that sometimes that just is what it is. You're never going to make someone else see it through your perspective. You can only respect their position, agree to disagree, and find some common ground maybe in something else.
Right.
Because you're not going to change everybody's minds. And I think that's when you're younger, in your 20s, you want to change the world. You're going to make everybody, you know, see your point of view. And now I kind of have, you know, I don't agree with a lot of stuff, but I have to be true to myself. So that just is what it is. So I would say to your listeners, really listen to that voice inside of you. It's telling you. And if you don't listen to it the first time, it will tell you louder the second time.
That's true.
And it will just get louder.
That's very true.
And louder. So, you know, have the time to maybe get some quiet time and just stillness and hear that where it should lead you.
Yeah. So, and also because, and that's a really good thought as far as, you know, how to make the connections with how you're being led, so that the courage happens, because there's a need for courage in stepping out and being authentic. So I'm going to ask a couple of hard questions, and I say they're hard only because, you know, it's a question that people don't normally have to answer, but because of my listeners, I want them to see that their experience is not, as we said in the very beginning, they're not alone, right? Yeah. So have you ever experienced a public failure?
Gosh, I'm sure I have. It's too many. I mean, I've, you know, public, I guess I've lost cases in court, which really, looking back, I'll be like, that doesn't even matter. You know, my daughter's eating disorder, I became contagious to so many other moms. They thought,
Wow.
yeah. And I don't see that as a public failure, but it was a really surprising kind of aspect. Like, here's my daughter fighting for her life. Because in that moment, the bubble burst. That perfect little world that you think you're in the middle of, you realize, you know, there's a red light flashing, and you realize what's important. And for me, it was all about getting my daughter help. And there were people that drifted away because they either couldn't deal with it, or they thought it was contagious, or I was somehow not a great parent because my daughter all of a sudden had an eating disorder. So I guess that, even though I don't look at it as that way, I guess some people would look at it that way. Just you go through life, just will knock you down so many. I mean, you have to kind of say, okay, the longer you live, the more you're going to have ups and downs, and to really appreciate the ups, you know, because you're going to lose family. You're going to, it's just life.
But
does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I think the thing that you were able to get out of that, and that's something that our listeners are sometimes are afraid of. And the thing that you were able to get out of it was, number one, the health of your family is paramount to everything else. And, you know, to be frank, I mean, glad those people made themselves, you know, scarce, because at least you know what your true support system is around that.
It really came to a point where it's help me or get out of my way.
Right.
Because I have such a clear, like, I have to get her help. And my best friend that I have had for over 20 years was there for me the whole time. So it isn't about quantity. You don't have to be friends with a million. It's quality. Are those people going to be by your side when things get tough? And if you can say one or two names, you're very blessed.
Right. Wow. So to wrap up, we have some, as I said, the one last question. It's one of my favorite questions. So my interview mentor is James Lipton, and if you're not familiar with him, he has in the actor studio. Unfortunately,
he passed away recently.
He did.
Loved him.
He did.
Gates of heaven. What do you think?
I know. I'm so excited, and I've been looking to see if somewhere and I haven't found it yet, but I'm going to find it. I want to know that he's answered that question for himself. Yes, yeah. I want to know what his answer was. So the question is, if heaven were to exist on earth, what would it have to include for you?
Love. It would have to include my family and love. That would be two non-negotiable elements, my family and love.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, me too. And this has been a delightful interview. And I would ask that you do us a favor and tell us where we can find you. Definitely tell us where we can find hot flashes and cool topics. And if they wanted to send you any topics to talk about, or wanted to subscribe, tell us where we can find you.
We are a weekly podcast. We come out every Wednesday, and it's on all podcast platforms. So Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, ones I don't even know we're on. Podbean, like we're on all these things. Yeah. And our website, which really contains a lot of information. We have blogs, we have YouTube videos, we do happy hours on there, and all of our episodes, that's hotflashescooltopics.com. And if they want to send me, which I love getting topics and everything, that's hotflashescooltopics@gmail.com. But we have a great Facebook group. We're up to almost 900 women of just really positive energy and topics. We share things, we laugh, we complain about hot flashes, we talk about our jobs, we talk about our kids. So we have a great group under groups on Facebook of hot flashes and cool topics as well. So I would invite anyone who's over the age of 40 who wants to talk about life to join that Facebook as well.
Perfect. Colleen, it was an amazing interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for tuning in to 10,000 Women, 10,000 Stages. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Find us at 10,000women10,000stages.com.